Really? Going nuclear? I'm not talking about 3 Mile Island either. What's about to glow and blow up next on Get Right with Lenny McAllister, starting right.
Why, you rascally rabbit!
Okay. Some of you may be saying that the nuclear option's not the biggest thing in the world. Others of you might say it's absolutely positively the worst thing since, I don't know. We can go into the analogy. We can go into the political ramifications. We can go into all that jazz if you want. We'll do it right here, right now. You know the deal. It's Get Right with Lenny McAllister. Thanking you once again for joining us here on another podcast. You know the drill. You know where to find me on Twitter, LennyMcAllister, as well. On Facebook, love your feedback. Very simple. tinyurl.com/LennyPAGE. Now, again, the PA is for the PA native back in the great Keystone State. Let's get into this nuclear option that Harry Reid has just put on the table to just to further make things worse. And I know some of you, again, love your feedback. You can give it to me as you like. We'll sit there and say very simply, there's no way on God's green earth that it's going to get any worse in Congress in regards to the partisanship, because it's already really, really bad, and people hate Obama because he's black, or they hate Obama because he's a Democrat, or they hate Obama because he was reelected, or they hate the Democrats because of Pelosi, or Reid, or Planned Parenthood, or the rollout of Obamacare, or the Republicans are evil, or we hate Republicans and they hate, Boehner, or Ted Cruz, or Rand Paul. I mean, I've heard all that before. And everybody has their reasons for saying that. Some of it's true, some of it's not true, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. We are the world, fly the flag, all that other jazz. But here's what it boils down to. When it comes to this nuclear option coming in the Senate with a rolling back rules that had been in place for decades, it's not a good thing. Now, I'm not sitting here and saying that the Republican Party have been good with this overall. They do not come to the table with clean hands. If you look at the record, the vast majority of President Obama's appointees have gotten through the Senate without any problems. The vast majority, over 90%. So the numbers sit there and indicate that, this is somewhat overblown by the Democrats in one regard. In another regard, when you look at all the filibusters that have happened under President Obama, roughly 50% of all the filibusters that have ever really happened. I think it's some kind of crazy number where it's been 160 plus filibusters, and 80 of them came under President Obama during his tenure as president. When you look at that, you sit there and you say, well, maybe all the numbers don't benefit the Republicans. But here's the thing that my party has a problem with when it comes to the optics of this situation. When Minority Leader Mitch McConnell in 2011, after the Tea Party wave of 2010, when one of his very first public statements in the new Congress, which was the 112th Congress, is our job as Republicans is to make President Obama a one-term president. Now, people keep saying that this is what they said in 2009. This is not what was said in 2009. So if you're going to do your historical research and quote things that happened previously, make sure you get the dates right. McConnell did say it. He just didn't say it in 2009. It was not something that happened right after the inauguration of the first African-American president. Way too much political capital for that to happen then. If he would have said that then, there would have been no way that the Democrats lose in 2010. Because that statement alone would have demonized the Republican Party for quite some time. It wouldn't have mattered in 2010. You wouldn't have had Tea Party momentum quite the way you had in 2010. It was a statement that was made after 2010, January 2011. Our job is to make President Obama a one-term president, which, by the way, every minority leader is going to say that. Just saying it publicly when you have the first African-American president in office, you've had some very questionable things said by elected officials in your party, activists in your party, candidates in your party. It's probably not something to say publicly. Even though in and of itself wasn't a bad statement, when you put it in the context of what's actually going on, it just wasn't very smart to do. But with that said, it was 2011, not 2009. So that's the first thing you got to understand. But even still, with that said, in 2011, moving forward, you think about the types of things that were said about this president, the types of things that were said by elected officials, by candidates, by activists, by party leaders, in the media, and they're all attributed to the Republican Party or the conservative movement. When you have all of these things lined up for at least 2 years, and you can generally say since 2008, you can safely say 5 years, but you can really say it ginned up going into the 2012 presidential election. When you have all of that in place, and then Harry Reid pulls this garbage, if you will, because it is garbage. Keep the rules, move forward from there. When this type of thing happens, although the Democrats are at fault, although Harry Reid should not have done this, although this is a travesty because it basically shows that we can't play nice with each other as the leaders of this country, of the upper chamber of Congress, therefore we have to change the rules. Although that is all true, and that is all attributable to the majority leader in the Senate, Harry Reid, who took his sweet old time passing a budget even when the Democrats controlled the House of Representatives, by the way, that had to use these types of things, such as reconciliation, to get Obamacare through the Senate. People continue to forget that. That's what transpired in 2010. They had the numbers, but not the votes in 2009. Then they didn't have the numbers, so they had to manufacture the votes in 2010. People want to forget that, but that is a true story. All that said, when you have all these facts making the Democrats look bad, when you have all the optics, for the most part, making the Republicans look bad, and these are optics. Optics are not quite the same as hardcore facts, especially when the Democrats are in control of the Senate, the facts should matter a little bit more than just the optics. But the problem that my party has is the fact that you have years of scattershot ill will that has been spread against the Obama administration and the Democrats, which is something that I have been warning Republicans about for several years now. You got to be a steady shot with your criticism. You can't be scattershot and just say whatever willy-nilly, because when these types of things happen, we don't come across with the political moral authority to say you're absolutely wrong. It's seen more as sour grapes than it is, hey, this has gone too far. Reconciliation, you want to pass a health care reform law using a procedure that gets budgets through because you no longer have 60 votes like you used to have, because when you had 60 votes, you could not convince 60 Democrats to vote for this. You could not convince folks in the House of Representatives to vote for this when you had the numbers on your side in 2009. And by the time you started shifting votes, Scott Brown wins in Massachusetts, which means that you no longer have the filibuster-proof Senate that you need to get this through without a Republican vote. See, these are facts. These are things that people are not thinking about, not realizing, not taking into consideration anymore. And the reason why they're not, agree, disagree with me, you know where to find me on Twitter, on Facebook. The reason why they're not is because the optics for the Republican Party are still so bad. I mean, first of all, Congress has an approval rating of 9%. The whole party, 9%. That number will make you gag, especially when you consider the fact that the vast majority of these incumbents are still going to win. And even when the incumbents don't win, very, very, very few seats flip. There really are no such thing as purple seats in the House of Representatives. Maybe in the Senate, obviously, because it's a whole state and you got different dynamics in play. But when you look at the House of Representatives, where those districts can be gerrymandered, and by the way, if people in general assemblies and Congress could gerrymander state boundaries for elections every 2 years, they would. Every 10 years, they would. Many, many, many would. Do you really need Rhode Island? We can use Rhode Island over here in Vermont. We can use Rhode Island over here in Massachusetts. Just for 2 years. We got a Senate race to win. We need the extra voters. I mean, so when they're doing that much of redrawing the lines, and both sides do it. I'm sick of people saying the Republicans did it in 2010 because they won the midterm elections in 2010 and it hit a census year. Democrats have been doing this for years. Go look at the state of Illinois. I'm certain that Massachusetts, their state districts have to look all funny-duddy, bunching Republicans all into one district so that, yes, you can have one district, but you cannot compete in four. Because that's how the game is played. Both sides do it. You give up one district to win three others. Or in the state, for example, of Illinois, you put enough Republicans in heavily Democratic districts so that, yes, you have some Republicans in, for example, the 1st Congressional District where a former Black Panther is the congressman. They're in farm country, probably 80 miles away from the west side of Chicago or the south side of Chicago. The same thing with the 7th District in Illinois with Danny Davis. But guess what? You at least have some representation. Guy will never come to your part of the district. Can care less about what you say. So I'm saying that to say both sides do this, so don't come to me with that. If they could gerrymander state boundaries every 2 years, every 10 years in order to win Senate races, that's what they would do. But with that said, with the low approval rating in Congress, which is bad in the first place, then on top of that, even if you lose an incumbent, you probably still don't lose the seat. It's still a red seat or a blue seat. And we'll talk about the Republicans for just a second. Even if you lose an incumbent, you probably will still keep the seat in the House of Representatives. It doesn't matter when it comes to elections how the optics looks, but it matters in these type of situations. Because Harry Reid is probably not going to pay a consequence for this. He probably won't. One, it's a year away from the elections for 2014. That's the first thing. Second thing, he's not going anywhere until at least 2016. So that's 2 more years for him. Then he's the majority leader, which means that when he was at his most vulnerable point, we lost out. He's still in leadership there, which means he's sitting on a war chest that is pretty healthy. So you got to have a very good candidate that comes out in 2016, and they have to ride a presidential ticket at that point in time. That's going to matter. So you have Republicans who, in one regard, can act any way they want, even if it's bad optics, because they can get reelected. But then when things like this come up, people focus more on the optics, what they could see, versus what is actually real. And in this instance, what is real is this. You don't start changing the rules of the Senate just because a couple of appointees don't get through in the time frame that you would like. Now, I'm not saying that Mel Watt should be held up. I'm not saying some of those other things. I'm not going to say something like, Obama's trying to pack the courts with people that think just like him. Of course he is. I mean, I know the conservatives are saying that, and that's the reason why you have to block these judicial appointees, because, they're going to turn to socialism and communism and all kind of craziness and this and the other. Look, presidents do that. They get that. Bush did it. Clinton did it. The other Bush did it. Reagan did it. Carter did it. Ford did it. Nixon did it. You get my point. I can continue to go back with the presidents. That's what they do with these judicial appointees. So that's not packing the courts. That's not FDR packing the courts. I can understand we don't like all these judicial appointees, or you may have concerns about them. But again, it goes back to facts and optics. Just the same with Mel Watt. You can agree or disagree with his politics, etc. You can agree or disagree with him being appointed to this on those regards. Again, when you look on those regards when you start looking at Poor Hemplo, just the record that President Obama has had, Wall Street versus Main Street. You can say, well, is he the right guy to lead in that position? I mean, you can make the merits of that. But when the facts say over 90% of his appointees have gone through, no problem at all. But the optics say that you're going to block everything that this guy does, and you have a little bit of numbers to back that up. When you have a senator that filibustered to stop the funding of Obamacare, and then Obamacare fails, you lose the ability, because of the optics, to say, I told you so. Now, there is a big I told you so out there for the Republican Party. But again, I say very clearly that when your optics show that you are rooting for this to fail, that you were basically saying all that you could say to throw mud on the whole premise of the law and the rollout and the administration, and you assign all type of dastardly ulterior motives to it. When the law and the rollout fail on its own merits, you lose the ability to say, I told you so. Just the same, unfortunately, and you can agree or disagree with me, Twitter, Facebook, you know where to find me. You can agree or disagree when it comes to Harry Reid making this move. To me, it's not the end of the world, but it is going to lead to something worse, because I guarantee you, one, the Tea Party element on Capitol Hill is not going away. The last thing you want, if you are, for example, a Democrat, is you do not want Republicans controlling all three after 2016. Because if you have a President Christie, for example, who's a likable guy, wants to work with both sides for the most part, has that reputation in New Jersey, but you have a different Speaker of the House. You have a more Tea Party-esque type of Speaker of the House. And then on the other side, let's say one or two people retire over the next couple of years, and you get somebody that's willing to go along with a Tea Party element in the House of Representatives. Or you still get John Boehner, but that Tea Party element says, listen, we've been waiting a while to control both chambers of Congress. This is what we're going to do. And not only are we going to roll back Obamacare, but we're going to change this rule, that law, this rule, that law. And we're going to do these three other things. And we're going to do it over the first 90 days. President Christie, we're going to put our stamp on your first 90 days and help you get what you want over the first 180 days if you go along to get along. Because that's kind of what they did with Obama, right? It's kind of what they did with Obama. Again, one of the criticisms about this president has been that when it came to the healthcare reform, he allowed Pelosi and Reid to drive the train, and then when it went off the tracks, they told him, hey, Superman, you got all the political capital, get us back on board. Well, some did. They were able to save Reid's job, even though the Tea Party and the Republicans kind of blotched that race with Sharon Angle more than anything else. But many, many other races they weren't able to save because of that. If they ran the same playbook from a Republican point of view on a President Christie, for example, you would end up having the pendulum swing too far in the other direction, where there would be retribution for this type of mood being set on Capitol Hill by the majority leader in the Senate. And that's the problem with this. It's not so much that, well, we can get these judicial appointees approved. Yeah, because that solves the short term, and I can understand where people have a problem with it, with these appointees being held up, D.C. Court of Appeals. But the bigger, long-term implications of doing something like this is where the irresponsibility comes into play. Because you already have a hyper-partisan mood on Capitol Hill. People are complaining about the Republicans being against Obamacare, but everybody forgets that not one Republican vote passed this through, and the majority of Americans did not want the law in its current form. And that Democrats had to be persuaded several times through several quote-unquote compromises, negotiations, leeways, agreements. You know where I'm going with this. In order to get it to pass. So why would this really do any good? Short term, Get what they want to get done. Long term, it's bad. And on top of that, as I wrap this up, and on top of that, this only makes the Obama legacy worse. This was a guy that had no, or very little, federal experience. He beat a former first lady and sitting senator. He beat a guy that had been in the Senate almost as long as he had been alive. And then beat another person that had almost been in Congress about as long as he had been alive, to become the 44th president of the United States, in large part because he was going to stop these types of things. He spoke out against it in the 15 minutes that he was a senator. It was 17 minutes, something along those lines. He spoke out against his very exact move. Now he's for it. I tell you, the biggest failure of the Obama presidency is not Obamacare. It's not unemployment. Those things really, really do matter. But the biggest failure of the Obama administration, from a legacy standpoint, is that he was unable to bridge the partisan divide that we came into 2009 with. In fact, it grew. And he had a hand in it. He did not drive it exclusively, but in instances where he could have pulled back on the reins and stopped the momentum of his hyper-partisanship, he did not. And anybody that says, yes, he did, he tried to work with Republicans, I'm just asking, be objective and look at the record. Be objective and look at the record. There are instances where he did, and there are other instances when he put the pedal to the metal when it came to the partisan divide. What do you think? You know where to find me on Twitter, LENNYMCALLISTER. You know where to find me on Facebook as well. I will catch up to you on a very, very reflective and Memorial Friday coming up tomorrow on the 50th anniversary of JFK. In the meanwhile, enjoy your Thursday. Try to watch the nuclear fallout coming from Capitol Hill. And let's see if we can get this country going forward as one big team. I'll talk to you soon. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. TCNGB. Take care and God bless. Peace.